Esse podcast é um oferecimento de Samsung Galaxy AI. E sabe o que mais ele te oferece? Que tal um intérprete em tempo real na palma das suas mãos para você nunca mais ter problemas em viagens ou reuniões? E falando em viagens, não precisa mais ficar com aquela foto torta. Com a câmera aprimorada, você deixa sua foto genial sem ter que baixar outros apps. Tem tanta coisa que o Samsung Galaxy AI pode fazer por você. Clica aí no banner para descobrir o que. Galaxy AI, a inteligência artificial nas suas mãos.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, S-H-O-W, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it happens to be your host, Eric Erickson, here across America. The phone number is 877-973-7425, should you wish to be on the program. I will take your phone calls momentarily. I just got to give you the landscape happening right now. Donald Trump doing multiple events in Georgia today. J.D. Vance doing multiple events in Nevada and Arizona today. Tim Walz doing a single closed-door event in Kentucky today. Kamala Harris doing no events anywhere today. Until tonight, she'll do a CNN town hall in Philadelphia. She had a press conference outside her home in Washington, D.C., where she blasted Donald Trump because anonymous sources told Trump haters at The Atlantic that he praised Hitler's generals. All the people who were cited on the record denied it happened. But who cares when it's Donald Trump? Report bad things bad. Now, I want to take a break from the raw politics of the campaign trail for a moment, because there's a story in the New York Times, and I think we've reached a tipping point on a particular issue. On transgenderism. You know, there's a report there was a big report done in London. It was a big scientific report. In fact, they've made the woman who authored the study a baroness. They put her in the House of Lords. And what they found in London, a scientific body of research done with great compassion, was that puberty blockers and gender transition treatments for kids actually don't improve their well-being, and in many cases make them worse. And many of the kids have underlying mental health issues that have manifested as feelings of transgenderism, and they aren't actually transgender. I got ambushed a while back. Didn't talk about it at the time. Wasn't relevant or worth it, but it's relevant with this story. I got ambushed about 6 months ago by a man who has a trans child and was very, very angry with me for statements I have made. And in this father's mind, essentially said, now the kid is late teens, and that the kid needed to transition. He was convinced he was a she, and to save his child's life, he did this. Now, as a parent, I do have a level of empathy here. But it's still, and I wasn't going to argue the point. The person was very angry with me. They wanted to get it out. They weren't a threat. I mean, I didn't feel like I was in danger or something. They needed to unburden themselves and clearly had this pent-up issue. Ran into me up in I was out shopping. and was just very, very, very upset. And I didn't say because I didn't want to provoke the guy, but essentially you are acknowledging that your child has a mental health issue. Transgenderism is a mental health issue. And in every other situation, when our brain and our body don't align, scientists, doctors, sociologists, psychologists try to convince a person to align their brain to reality. For some reason that escapes me, other than it's just the sick, twisted, and demented nature of it all, with the transgender issue, instead of using therapy to convince the person who thinks they are actually trapped in the wrong body that they are in the right body, we decide to surgically, permanently alter the body of the person to conform to the mind. And that seems to me to be terrible, inappropriate, bad. And you know what? All the studies suggest that it actually doesn't improve the mental well-being. And in fact, the British study showed that has now completely changed how Britain handles the trans issue. The British study showed that, in fact, it doesn't actually improve their mental well-being. It doesn't improve it, and it has nothing to do with societal pressure. And that was one of the controversial points here, is because the suicide rate of people who are trans continues to be high even after they transition. And what they say is, well, it's the people inside here so mean to them. And actually what the research has found is, no, that's not the case. They are suffering from mental illness. And what we've done is, instead of treating the mental illness, we've decided to surgically manipulate and alter their body. And it doesn't make the mental illness go away. You can be compassionate and empathetic. But I got to tell you, there was an Irish researcher, and I don't have the clip with me at the moment, but the Irish researcher was saying that the parents of the trans kids who have been surgically altered are going to be like the Japanese on the small islands in the Pacific who, when the war was over, still couldn't believe it and refused to give up. Because when you as a parent have decided for your child's well-being to surgically castrate your child, perform mastectomies on your child, perform hysterectomies on your child, all because you fell into the deluded notion that that would make your child better, you're going to be like the Japanese on the islands after World War II, just absolutely incapable of acknowledging that you were wrong. And how could you acknowledge that you were wrong? Because if you acknowledge that you were wrong, you will be admitting you engaged in child abuse, and God forbid you acknowledge it. And that all leads me to this from the New York Times. And kudos to the New York Times, which I think we have crossed a tipping point here, because the New York Times has become in the last 6 months one of the most vocal media outlets in the country to challenge the understanding of transgenderism. Here's the story. An influential doctor and advocate of adolescent gender treatments said she has not published a long-awaited study on puberty-blocking drugs because of the charged American political environment. The doctor, Johanna Olson Kennedy, began the study in 2015 as part of a broader, multi-million-dollar federal project on transgender youth. She and colleagues recruited 95 children from across the country and gave them puberty blockers, which stave off the permanent physical changes, like breasts or a deepening voice, that could exacerbate their gender distress known as dysphoria. The researchers followed the children for 2 years to see if the treatments improved their mental health. An older Dutch study had found that puberty blockers improved well-being, results that inspired clinics around the world to regularly prescribe the medications as part of what is now called gender-affirming care. You should note there were lots of questions about that Dutch study even at the time it was conducted and ever since. The American trial did not find a similar trend. Dr. Olson Kennedy said in a wide-ranging interview, puberty blockers did not lead to mental health improvements, she said, most likely because the children were already doing well when the study began. That conclusion seemed to contradict an earlier description of the group in which Dr. Olson Kennedy and her colleagues noted that 1/4 of the adolescents were depressed or suicidal before treatment. In the 9 years since the study was funded by the National Institutes of Health, and as medical care for this small group of adolescents became a searing issue in American politics, Dr. Olson's team has not published the data. Asked why, she said the findings might fuel political attacks. She said she intends to publish the data, but the team had been delayed because the National Institutes of Health had cut some of the project's funding. The National Institutes of Health denies it and says the project received $9.7 million in government support as of this day. Here's what's happened. An American doctor who runs a youth gender clinic in Los Angeles, who advocates for gender transitions, took a group of 96 kids, 1/4 of whom were depressed or suicidal before treatment began, and found that their puberty-blocking treatments didn't work to improve the mental well-being of the kids. And instead of publishing a result that contradicted what they wanted the study to show, they chose not to publish the study. And now, all these years, and it's 9 years later, when called out by the New York Times on why have you not published a study that was funded by the federal government, they say, oh, well, turns out that it's a politically charged environment. We can't do this. And by the way, the kids are fine. All the kids are fine. It turns out that the puberty blockers didn't help, but that's okay because all the kids were fine to begin with and they're still fine, except that's not what you said when the study began. You said 1/4 of the adolescents were depressed or suicide before treatment. Now you're saying they were actually all fine the whole time. She, by the way, you should note, is one of the most vocal advocates for adolescent gender treatments. She served as an expert witness in many legal challenges to the state bans. She said she was concerned the study's results could be used in court to argue we shouldn't use blockers because it doesn't impact them. That's what your study showed. That's what your study showed. In fact, England's youth gender clinic in 2011 tried to replicate the Dutch results from the Dutch study with a study of 44 kids. But 5 years later, the British researchers reported puberty blockers had not changed their well-being, including rates of self-harm. The results weren't made public until 2020, years after puberty blockers became a standard treatment. In fact, every study since the Dutch study have disputed the Dutch studies. Dr. Hilary Cass is the woman I was talking about who's just been made a baron in Great Britain, baroness. She's a pediatrician. She published an extensive review of youth gender services in England and said the delays from the American and British research groups had led the public to believe that puberty blockers improve mental health, but there is very little evidence to support the conclusion. It's really important we get results out there so we understand whether it's helpful or not, and for whom, Dr. Cass said. Her report found weak evidence for puberty blockers and noted some risks, including lags in bone growth and fertility loss in some patients. It prompted the National Health Service in England to stop prescribing the drugs outside of new clinical trials following pullbacks in other European countries. The data did not go the way an advocate for gender transitions wanted the data to go. So that advocate has decided not to publish the results. When the study began, that advocate said that 1/4 of those in the research group were suffering from depression and suicidal thoughts. And Nell says the reason she's not publishing is, well, all the kids were fine when they went in. All the kids are fine now. There's no reason to publish the data. It's a politically charged environment. I would suggest that this is someone who benefits from these sorts of surgeries, and the data undermines the benefits she claims, and is now engaging potentially in a cover-up of the data that used our taxpayer dollars to fund it. We should have the information. We should be able to analyze it. We should be able to see it, and that we're not suggests that we continue to be lied to by transgender advocates about what the data shows. And again, we're dealing with a mental health issue. We shouldn't pretend it's not.
Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
Hi there, welcome. Eric Erickson here. The phone number 877-973-7425. Waiting very patiently is Pamela in Antioch, California. Pamela, and Bill, you better note I've got somebody from California on my show. Bill's the program director out in Sacramento. Pamela, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much.
Sure. What's going on?
Yeah, I am a big fan. I attended your gathering with a friend last year. Was, I can say, the best political event ever that I've
Thank
attended.
you.
It was a lot of fun. I got to meet every candidate but Nikki Haley, who I actually became a delegate for in California, but that didn't work out so well.
Yeah, my kid, she wanted to not go to college. She wanted to work for Nikki, and I made her go to college. So good choice on my part.
Good choice. When I was there, I'm a military mom, and I questioned everybody I approached, the Congress, senators, the candidates about the mess of our military right now under this administration. And I was like, trying to tell everybody, and still am, that, Kamala Harris's policies are just taking our country and California, izing it. And we have just such a disaster here. I think people have finally woken up here even to the crime, the outrageous prices, the immigration issues. We can feel an energy here. Our registrations are up in our county, which we're just east of San Francisco. We're Republicans, and I think the enthusiasm really increased with the unfortunate first assassination attempt. But that's when I became, all in on Trump. That's the kind of commander-in-chief I want, protecting my child.
Pamela, it's interesting you say this, because this goes back to Trump taking that trip to Southern California. Like no one's under any illusions that he's going to win California, but there are a lot of congressional races that are in play in California because of exactly what you're talking about. There's the proposition on the ballot about crime that Gavin Newsom opposes. Yeah. A general frustration about the state of affairs in California and the economy, immigration. There's a story in the San Francisco Chronicle I put in show notes that essentially the wine industry is admitting without illegal aliens, they couldn't harvest the grapes because they're not about to pay Americans what you would have to pay an American to harvest the grapes. And it's causing a backlash. It is. Now, there should be a backlash against banks out there for what they're doing as well, and that has led to Old Glory Bank. My bank, I have been a customer of theirs now for well over a year. They have unbelievable service. I was actually talking to a business the other day who said he was a little skeptical of moving his business to Old Glory Bank, but he needed a loan and decided, since it's my bank, I'll reach out to him. He said they were more hands-on, more willing to show up at his business with a live human being to talk to them and work through it with them than the bank he had used that had a physical branch location down the street from him. He was flabbergasted by their customer service. You will be too. OldGloryBank.com. If your kid needs an account, Old Glory Bank is perfect. You can deposit cash, no fee checking and savings, great interest rates. OldGloryBank.com. You can do a custodial account. You can fill out the form online. OldGloryBank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Old Glory Bank is my bank. It can be your bank as well. OldGloryBank.com. Greetings, conversationalists. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. I am delighted to have you with me. I'm trying to queue up this audio for you because we need to have a chat. We gotta. This is actually like this isn't a flippant moment. This is an actually serious moment here, and let me cue up this video. I just got it. This is Kamala Harris and her speech that she gave outside the vice president's residence. I have been to the vice president's residence. If you want to know where it is, if you know where the Naval Observatory, well, let's back up. If you know where the Washington National Cathedral is in Washington, D.C., it is right there. The Harris's house is at the Naval Observatory, which is right by the it's right by the cathedral. Of course, my computer would suddenly be having hiccup issues. Let's see here. Let's get this synced. This is important. I got to make sure that everybody can get this audio here. I'm going to do this. You know, sometimes I have to be my own tech support here, and I'm willing to do it just for you guys. I actually had a guy come by the office yesterday, and he says, "Who is your IT department? Who do you have for your IT department?" And I said, "You're looking at him. It's me. I do it myself." Well, all right, I can't get this loaded, but that's okay. I can fire up the video. This is Kamala Harris speaking in front of the vice president's residence in Washington, D.C. Kamala Harris now addressing the nation about Donald Trump and her concerns about his statements as reported in Politico.
And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia to carry out his personal and political vendettas. Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable. And in a second term, people like John Kelly would not be there to be the guardrails against his propensities and his actions.
Now, notice the guardrails. Notice the guardrails language. That gets me back to George Stephanopoulos. It is clearly a talking point that the left is using.
Well, I've spoken to Trump many times about some of these people that have crossed him, and I asked him what his next administration would be like. What he's told me is he didn't know anybody. He had to rely on advice to hire people last time. Now he knows people. He will put people in who are loyal to him. He will put people in that will carry out his orders.
The guardrails will be gone.
Yeah.
The guardrails will be gone. Kamala Harris, same language. The guardrails. There will be no guardrails. Donald Trump. First of all, let's back up here. Let's back up. You people on the left were beside yourselves when this past term the United States Supreme Court got rid of the Chevron standard. In the Looper Bright case, they got rid of the Chevron standard, and the Chevron standard was a case that said that when Congress passes a nebulous law, it is the bureaucrats of the executive branch who get to write the regulations and interpret the law as they see fit. And the Supreme Court says, no, the heck you do not. Interpretation of the law is a third branch function, not an executive branch function, and therefore we are not going to be bound to your interpretation of the law. And you know the result. It makes it impossible for Donald Trump to be a dictator because the third branch of government, the judiciary, gets to interpret the laws as regulations are drawn up to see if they're appropriate, as opposed to just giving the executive branch carte blanche. The Chevron decision, getting rid of it, actually prevents Donald Trump from being any sort of dictator. But to that point, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. Donald Trump is the executive branch of government. And if you're upset about Donald Trump, then you need to get Congress to do its job. And look what you people on the left did. You're so psychologically inconsistent when it comes to this. You were upset that the Supreme Court said that Congress writes laws, not the executive branch. You wanted the executive branch to do it because you wanted the power to do it. The Supreme Court said, no, the executive branch doesn't have that power. And you were furious. You didn't want Congress to do the job. You wanted to do the job in the executive branch, and now Donald Trump might get elected. You should be thanking Sam Alito, John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, Clarence Thomas, Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch. You should be thanking them. What all of this is, from Jeffrey Goldberg at The Atlantic to Kamala Harris outside the vice president's mansion, is a very latent dog whistle to get Donald Trump assassinated. They don't think they can stop him at this point. They don't think they can stop him. They want him dead. The Democrats are no longer trying to win the election. They're trying to get their opponent murdered because they don't think they can beat him. Anonymous sources, not people on the record, people who we don't even know if they are real, say Donald Trump favorably quoted Hitler to The Atlantic 4 years ago. The same outlet, by the way, funded by Kamala Harris's best friend forever, Lauren Powell Jobs. The same outlet said Donald Trump said all sorts of other stuff about soldiers, and everyone on the record said it wasn't true. It was only people who, they were all anonymous, said this is so. They're doing the same thing again. They are trying to get the man killed because they don't think they can beat him. The Democrats are not trying to cheat. They're trying to get their opponent murdered. Sounds very dictatorial, third world to me. James Carville has a piece today in the New York Times. Here's the headline. 3 reasons I'm certain Kamala Harris will win. This is from James Carville, a man who has successfully won not just presidential races, but races around the world for global leaders. Here are his 3 reasons he thinks Kamala Harris is going to win. Number 1, Mr. Trump is a repeat electoral loser. This time will be no different. Number 2, money matters and Ms. Harris has it in droves. Number 3, it's just a feeling. Y'all, I'm sorry. If James Carville, a man who won the office of presidency for Bill Clinton, thought Kamala Harris was really going to win, he would have good reasons, not feelings. He would have data, not smears against Donald Trump. That James Carville in the New York Times cannot cite polling data to show him this, that James Carville, now 50 states, all 50 states are now voting, and James Carville at this point should have the data to show some trend lines in the early vote that look good for Kamala Harris. He cites exactly 0. He comes down to, I have a feeling. And what is his feeling? It's 100% emotional. That's not a man who actually thinks Kamala Harris is winning. That's a man who thinks he's got to buck up morale 2 weeks before the election. She doesn't appear to be winning, and Carville kind of indicates that he doesn't think she's winning, even while saying he thinks she is. Now, I got to give, of all people, NBC News reporter some kudos for asking Kamala Harris a question. Now, for those of you who don't know, if you go to Twitter and you follow me on Twitter, you can see that I'm on video on Twitter. In fact, if you go to twitter.com or X, whatever, I refuse to call it X, and you're on a website or I don't know how you do it on your phone because I rarely use it on my phone, but over on the right-hand side, there's a live on X. And I'm for me, my followers, about 10,000 people watching right now. You can click it. The reason I say that is because I'm going to show you and play you some video of the Kamala Harris interview on NBC News, where the reporter asks Kamala Harris a question. I'm not going to tell you what the question is, but here's what I want you to know. When Kamala Harris begins to answer the question, she can't make eye contact with the reporter. She doesn't make eye contact with the reporter. She stammers. She turns her head. She looks up. She looks down. She looks to the side. She doesn't look ahead. She can't answer the question. What was the question, you say?
You have made it clear that you believe this is a binary choice between you and Donald Trump. Those are the candidates on the ballot.
there's
of course.
two choices. Yes.
And I know that Joe Biden is not on the ballot. I understand that. But the reason that you are at the top of the ticket is because he dropped out of this race. And so I want to ask you, and it was largely because of that debate performance back in June. You defended him in the days before and in the days after as you were campaigning for another 4 years for President Biden. Can you say that you were honest with the American people about what you saw in those moments with President Biden as you were with him again and again, repeatedly in that time?
Of course. Joe Biden is an extremely accomplished, experienced, and capable in every way that anyone would want if they're president.
And you never saw anything like what happened at the debate night behind closed doors with him?
It was a bad debate. People have bad debates. He is absolutely...
But that's the reason why you're here, and he's not running for the top of the ticket.
Well, you'd have to ask him if that's the only reason why.
What do you think?
I am running for president of the United States. Joe Biden is not. And my presidency will be about bringing a new generation of leadership to America that is focused on the work that we need to do to invest in the ambitions and aspirations of the American people.
It's a judgment question. That's why I ask. Can the American people trust you in these moments, even when it's maybe uncomfortable for Americans to level with Americans in that way? So that's why I ask. And it sounds like what you're saying is you feel like you never saw anything like that from President Biden.
I have worked with Joe Biden, hours and hours and hours over these 4 years, whether it be in the Situation Room or the Oval Office. Joe Biden is the one who was able to bring NATO together during a crisis where, for the first time in 70 years, Europe saw and has seen war. Joe Biden has done the work that has been about being a leader on what we have done to fix so much of what has been broken in terms of the economy because of Donald Trump's mismanagement. I speak with not only sincerity, but with a real firsthand account of watching him do this work. I have no reluctance in saying that. No, of course I don't.
You know, I want to say something kind about Kamala Harris for a moment. Don't shoot me for saying something kind about Kamala Harris. Just hear me out for a minute. And I'm willfully taking the partisanship out of this. You'll know what? I don't care for her. I'm not going to vote for her. I'm just, as a student of politics, I actually feel bad for Kamala Harris. She has gone as high as she can go. The weight of that glass ceiling now is upon her head and shoulders as she pushes into it and tries to shatter it. And she can't do it. And she knows now probably she's not going to do it. And in large part, it is because she hitched her wagon to an old mule named Joe Biden, who ran her wagon into the ditch. And she can't bring herself to get rid of it. She can't unshackle herself from his record. She can't get away from him. She is bound down in history by a dementia patient, and she knows it. And at this point, she perpetuated the lie with other people for her own ambition, and it has been exposed, and she cannot now admit that she and the rest of them were playing everyone. Yeah, by God, I feel a little bit bad for her. She made her own bed. She's lying in it. She gets what she deserves. But at the same time, she's exercising a level of loyalty to Biden and his family that is unwarranted and undeserved. But she knows she is where she is because of him. And so she can't bring herself to throw him under the bus. And probably also does know if she did, it would raise all sorts of other questions about her participation in the cover-up. Yeah, I feel a little bad for her. Like, she's on the verge of the presidency and she's not going to do it. But also, lady, you did this to yourself. You did it to yourself because you wanted the power. And as much as you attack Donald Trump for putting power over principle, you have done the exact same thing. And you are getting the Greek tragedy ending you deserve. Hillsdale College would love to have a relationship with you. If you go to ericforhillsdale.com, ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com, you can sign up with Hillsdale College, get a free pocket Constitution and Declaration of Independence, and then you can get Imprimus. It is completely free. It is great show prep for your mind. It is highly informative, educational, great, insightful reading comes to your mailbox from Hillsdale College. Also, you can get their podcast network completely for free on your favorite podcast app. Just look for the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. You can get Dr. Larry Ard's lectures on the Constitution, Victor Davis Hanson's on citizenship, and so much more, all free. Why? Because Hillsdale College has had a mission for a very long time, since the 1800s, to educate Americans wherever they are at any station in life. They're one of the very first college campuses in America to integrate. They wanted every American to have education, regardless of race. They're a wonderful institution, and they give so much to you for free. Go to ericforhillsdale.com today, ERICK, ericforhillsdale.com, and learn from Hillsdale College. All right, welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. I'm going to try to squeeze in one for phone call here. Now, am I going to mispronounce your name? Is it Maceo? Maceo, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. I guess you can hear me with both my earbuds on.
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I had no idea. Are you wearing AirPods?
Yeah, earpods. And
that's what it sounds like on the other end. You sound perfectly fine. I would have never known.
Okay. Well, thank you. I've been hearing a rumor that she's considering dropping out. So she took the day off to basically either get motivated to get back in, but it's been rumored that she's exhausted and she's letting Obama run for it. And the other thing is, how is it possible for us for Trump to win the election when there's 14 states that's no voter ID? Can you please answer that?
Yes. Okay. So number one, don't believe the rumor she's dropping out. She couldn't if she even wanted to at this point because she's on the ballot. It's too late to change the ballot with all the votes being cast. So she's stuck. Now, as for 14 states that don't have voter ID, it doesn't matter because they're all blue states. Trump's not going to win anymore. He's not going to win anyway. He's not going to win California. He's not going to win New York. He's not going to win Illinois. So what matters is the Electoral College, and many of those states, including Georgia, have beefed up their voter ID rules, requiring a driver's license or a Social Security number to vote. I cast my absentee ballot last night, and I had to write on my driver's license number on the ballot for them to even be willing to count my ballot. It's got to align to what's in the file. So yes, listen, the Harris campaign is spreading a rumor that Donald Trump has some sort of mental illness, and that's why he's not doing a lot of events. The problem is he's doing a ton of events. The Trump campaign is out saying, we think she's going to drop out now and Michelle Obama's going to be it. Can't. So once the ballots are printed and people start voting, a candidate can't be thrown off the ballot unless they commit a felony. And then they're thrown off the ballot, and you can't vote for that person. They can't be replaced at this time. So if Harris were somehow found guilty tomorrow of a felony, she would be thrown off. She wouldn't be able to vote for herself. In some states, she might get removed from the ballot, but it's not going to happen. Don't worry about it. Trump, convicted of felony in New York, didn't matter there either. He's on the ballot. It's going to be these two, and I don't think she's going to win, but that's my opinion at this point.